Karin Bertozzi. Welcome, Karin, and thanks for taking the time to talk to us today.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
That's great. So good to see you. Well, let's start. We'll refresh everybody. Briefly tell us a little bit about your backstory of your event and like what your initial recovery was like.
Okay, so it's funny you said briefly because I think you know from experience these stories can can get pretty involved and pretty detailed and take everybody down a path. But in a nutshell, about 6.5 years ago, I was in a grocery store, and hang on, let me backtrack a little bit. Before that, I was a young mom of 3 kids. I worked in fitness. I had just taught 2 yoga classes that day and went into my neighborhood market to get lunch like I always did on a Thursday. We're creatures of habit. So I pulled into the parking lot, and I remember thinking, I am so hungry. I really thought sort of the uneasiness that I was feeling was maybe being dehydrated or needing food. And I walked into the grocery store, and right away I knew I was going to faint. And I was able to get the attention of somebody who works there. And I told him, I don't feel well. I'm going to need help. I got myself down to the floor because I didn't want to crack my head open. I really thought that was going to be the worst thing that was going to come out of this episode, right? And then from there, 4 days later, I've got my husband and thoracic cardiovascular surgeon trying to wake me up after being in the ICU for 4 days, totally sedated. And I was being told that I had had a 12-hour open heart surgery for an ascending aortic aneurysm with dissection. Aneurysm, of course, I had heard of, really learning really more for the brain, right? So I kind of really didn't know what anything meant. It was a fog, like all of us that have been through this. It ends up being just a fog because of all the medications we're on and whatnot. I was there in the ICU for 18 days. I had a fair amount of complications. I had pacing issues. I now, when I was discharged, right before I was discharged, a pacemaker went in. So I have a dual lead pacemaker. I'm 100% dependent. I had a MRSA scare. I had clotting issues. I had some that kind of stuff happening. So it was an extended stay for me in the ICU. So I came home, and throughout all of this, my surgeon knew it had to be something genetic. I was so young, I was fit, I had checked all the boxes. Like a lot of us, right? This really surprised me and came out of what I thought was nowhere. Never had high blood pressure, never had any high cholesterol, ate fairly clean. And you know, he just had a feeling it had to be something genetic. So as we look back into our family history, thank goodness my grandmother was an excellent family historian. So we had loads of information about my dad's side. And my paternal grandfather died very young in his sleep at age 53 of a cardiac event. Okay, so what was interesting, because it was a sudden death, even back in the early 1970s, they did do an autopsy, and he died of an ascending aortic aneurysm with dissection. So that was the first sort of, this is something going on within our family. But what's also super interesting for me, I'm the youngest of 4 siblings. My event was in October. 2 months later, in December, my siblings were all scanned. All of my brothers were walking around with aneurysms, all of them. 2 went on to have elective Bentall procedures, replacing the arch and their valves. 1 brother's being monitored. He's in a steady range, and they're just watching him very closely. And then unfortunately, I lost one of the brothers that had the preventative surgery. We lost him. So I am super passionate now, especially with the loss of my brother Bob, the diagnosis we got for our family, the fact that there's 11 children in the next generation. I am so passionate about people knowing their family history. You know, we have to know these things moving forward. And as I've gotten more involved with Aortichope and other organizations like this, you know, the science is really, really, really getting better for us, you know, and the procedures are really, really getting better for us. And the ways of diagnosing it are really, really getting better for us. So So yeah, in a nutshell, that's my story. Well, and another thing I'll add, upon leaving the hospital, I went home with 16 prescriptions. I know some people went home with as many as 40. It depends, but 16 prescriptions was a heck of a lot of medication for me. So that was a lot to wrap my brain around. I was not released to cardiac rehab until 10 weeks post-op. So my dissection actually was traveling up into my carotids. So that was medically managed, and we were waiting for scar tissue to kind of, settle in. But my dissection also was transverse. So, all of my arch was cut out, dacron here. My valve was repaired, not replaced. So I still have my native valve. And then, like many of you guys that are watching and friends of Aortic Hope, my life has changed on a dime. It's a series of doctor's appointments and doctor's appointments and doctor's appointments, but I have to remind myself every time those are coming up, how grateful I am to know that this happened, or that I had, that this is a genetic thing that's happening in our family. Again, I go back to just the importance of really knowing what's going on. You don't want these things to be a surprise. We have all heard stories that have ended, just very sadly. And I just am a huge advocate of really knowing what's happening in your family.
Right. And it's unfortunate for your one brother, but how fortunate it was that the other two were able to find out an aneurysm before they had an emergency like you did.
Well, and exactly. And, it was interesting because all of those aneurysms were all at a point, well, except for the one brother that hasn't had anything done yet, but the other two, it was time for them to have surgery. So potentially they were at the point of rupture, they were at the point of dissection. So I think they really had to, look, nobody wants to make that elective decision. I think when you're walking around, you feel like everything's working, you're living your life, and it's a scary, hard decision to make. Very,
it's tough, but I think that also, like, when you cut down that watch and wait period and you're almost thrust directly into it, sometimes that can be easier to some extent as well.
Oh,
because that watch and wait, we know, from hearing from other people in the community, can be very taxing and very difficult in its own right.
Right. No,
and for us that are constantly monitoring and hoping that the next shoe doesn't fall with something else, if something else is being watched.
Right.
That watch and wait becomes a huge anchor around your ankle,
Yes.
But you touched upon something that's really important, and that's the family genetic idea, which is something that we hammer at with Aortic Hope, and that Think Aorta really tries to hammer home with Think Aorta, Think Family. Is that idea of once that first shoe is dropped somewhere in the family, it's time to get everybody looked at.
Yeah, and just kind of adding on to that, I have the good fortune, I live in the Washington, D.C. area. So straight away, I was sent up to Hopkins in Baltimore, and Hal Dietz is my geneticist from Loeys Dietz, which is a connective tissue disorder.
Right.
And so I did genetic testing there and at the University of Texas. And, it kind of came back. I don't have any of the known connective tissue disorders, no Marfan's, no Loeys Dietz, no Ehlers-Danlos, all of that. So I kind of live in this nebulous world of something's going on. We don't really know what it is. And that's a little frustrating for me because I would like to identify what that is so we can test my children, the next generation, and see if they have it. Much like the way the BRCA gene testing goes for breast cancer.
No, exactly. But I mean, at this point, as long as they're doctors and you're the good mom informing their doctors and they're going to get to an age, they're going to get those echoes potentially to look at it once they know the family history. So, I mean, the most important thing is there. The gene, like we've seen in a lot of cases, I mean, there are people with connective tissue disorders that don't ever have an aortic issue.
Right.
So knowing that gene and changing everything doesn't really change anything. For those of us that's why just that idea of informing people about the family history itself.
Yeah, good point. And part of my experience with Dr. Dietz is, all the kids my kids are all college age now anyway, but they're on a path of echoes, yearly echoes. And, certainly as they move into adulthood, really watching their pressure and that sort of thing. And again, like you said, it doesn't really matter what it's called or what it is or isn't. We have it. There's a high.
That's what it is. I mean, they know at this point that much, that familial the FTAAD, the familial
Yes.
thoracic aortic dissections,
Yes.
um, it's highly genetic.
Yes.
And even if they don't pinpoint exactly what a connective tissue disorder
Yes.
is by
Yeah.
name at this point,
Right.
but they know that for those of us that, especially under the age of 60, that
Hmm.
suddenly had this event, that it was not just lifestyle and potential hypertension, even though hypertension you know, might be attached. Like in your case, like you, I did not have hypertension,
Right.
but I was an athlete. Who knows what my exertion blood pressure was at a given time.
Yeah.
Um, I was drinking energy drinks.
Hmm.
That was not helping situations. So I know that my blood pressure and my heart rate was elevated at periods.
Yeah.
Found a genetic weakness, it found a genetic weakness.
Right.
That's just basically what it comes down to. Just because I don't know and it's of indeterminate origin at this point,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't change anything for me. I tell my family members, you know, my cousins, stuff like that. Unlike you, I did not have. I mean, there was some sudden cardiac, but that all seemed to be actual heart. But there was brain aneurysm history in my family.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So, which they
Yeah.
know there's similarities and ties to that.
Well,
So,
it's all vascular. Yeah. So,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me a little bit. You said you were released to cardiac rehab. Tell me a little bit about how that went for you.
So cardiac rehab was a godsend for me. I encourage you as a patient, um, if you have access to it, I cannot say enough about it. So as Greg just mentioned, he was an athlete as well. And I was too up until this event. And 10 weeks sitting around waiting for somebody like me to be given the stamp of approval to go and actually be in the setting and increase my speed on a treadmill. I was desperate for it. And I remember my surgeon saying, okay, we're ready. We want you to go twice a week. And I was like, oh, come on, let me go every day. Please let me go every day. And he allowed me to do that. And cardiac rehab, for those of you that might be watching and don't really have an idea of what it is, you're monitored. So not only are you physically gaining strength, but there's such an emotional part to this, Greg. I mean, fear. So cardiac rehab helped me to become more confident. Right? It's okay to raise my heart rate. It's okay to sweat a little bit. It's okay. It's okay to stop and then still feel my heart going. Like we are still meant to feel emotions. We're still meant, even with a pacemaker, even and all the meds I'm on, we're still meant to feel things. Our hearts are still supposed to elevate and then drop back down. So cardiac rehab was such a blessing and such a gift for me. And at first, I was a little I was thrilled to be in there because I knew it was on the road to recovery, and I was thrilled to be in there because it was my familiar space, being in a gym setting. But my familiar space was not being around 70 and 80-year-old men. Right. So when I walked in there and I saw everybody, I just thought, holy cow, here we go. So that was another experience in and of itself. And truthfully, maybe the first couple of weeks I kept a hat on and I kept my earbuds in and whatever. And I was the youngest one and female, that weighed on my mind quite a bit. Finally, something switched in my brain and I thought, I can learn something from all these guys and older women too, right? So that next generation, I can. So anyway, I let my guard down and made really amazing friends, that span the generations. And, I mean, it was just really good because I felt so isolated. My kids were back at school. My husband was back to work. And here I was living with this major event that had just happened. And, I made friends with people that had MIs and, different things. It was really hard to find somebody else who had what I had, right? Aortic dissection and pacemaker. I think one of the first people I met, I found Karin Anderson online, I think really was one of the first people, especially she's, my age, and I can identify a lot with, sort of her story. And so cardiac rehab, I think for me, it wasn't so much about physically getting my strength back because I knew how to do that because I had been an athlete and I had worked in fitness. For me, it was such a gift emotionally, People just saying, you got this, you can do it, you got it, looking good, feeling strong, like all of that. So that was the lesson for me in cardiac rehab. And then also I just got to learn life lessons from people, people that had already raised their children, people that were moving into retirement. And, in the Washington, D.C. area, we have so many highly educated, interesting people. So I made a lot of really, amazing friends. So that was really a gift. But I just can't recommend it enough. I just think it's so important, again, to build up your confidence. And again, I think it's more for your emotional health, really.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. And like you said, you came from a world of fitness and everything like that,
Yeah.
which is a good segue that we can talk about right now, because you've actually done a session for us with aortichope before, with cardiac yoga.
You got it. Yeah.
And chair yoga.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
tell me a little bit about how that came about. And
sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So as I mentioned, I had been an athlete for years, 3 older brothers. I mean, I was a tomboy to the core, first one up to climb a tree, first one in the pool. So I had lots of sports underneath my belt. And then as I had my children, we were moving between New York City and Washington, D.C. And I just thought, fitness and personal training was a way for me to kind of get back into that. And I could balance it with raising the kids. So yoga started really speaking to me in terms of, again, it tapped into the spiritual side of my life. I knew how to work out, but there was something, just the whole idea of trying to stay balanced and moving through your life with intention, all of that spoke to me. And this is even before my heart event. So I taught yoga for about 14 years before I had my dissection. So I taught all kinds, all age groups, all levels of fitness. You name it, I taught it. And then I had this event, and, I did go through a phase where, and maybe you can relate to this, my body betrayed me. I treated it so well. I ate the right things. I kept my weight under control, and it betrayed me. But then again, I had to switch it in my head. Did it betray me, or did it really save me? Right? Was my level of fitness and the nutrition I put in it and the exercise and self-care that I gave it, was that perhaps something that added to, my recovery so far being just so successful? So I think when I went through my event, a lot of those little aha moments happened, and I had to switch it. So my body didn't betray me. My body actually probably saved me, because I was in a good place. And that was another thing, just to tie it back to cardiac rehab, that ended up being a motivator for me as well. Oh my God, this might happen again. I got to be in my best shape ever. I got to do my best. I got to be, you're kind of always preparing for battle or the next marathon, whatever it's going to be. But I have a lot of restrictions. So back to the cardiac yoga, I had been a yoga teacher for many years, again, taught all kinds of populations. About a year post-op, I really, I took about a year off. I say that, but I was still doing the mommy stuff, doing some therapy. And then somebody at cardiac rehab, one of our managers, asked me if I had ever heard of cardiac yoga. And I was super intrigued, and she was like, you'd be perfect at it. Let me tell you about it. So it's actually a program out of UVA, the University of Virginia, so super close by, led by a woman who's a PhD, who had actually years ago helped develop the program that Dean Ornish presents to a lot of cardiac rehab programs. He was, he's West Coast, and I think Oprah kind of helped to make him famous and whatever. Anyway, the program sounded really legit. And because it's in Charlottesville, just a couple hours away, I knew I could, go down for the training. And anyway, it was great. I did the training, love it. And then I started my own cardiac yoga group through Suburban Hospital in the area here in Maryland. I've been teaching for about 5 years or so. And I teach 2 classes a week. Of course, now with COVID, it's been on Zoom. And it is mostly chair-based, but it's been a really amazing gift to me, because I still feel like I'm a little bit in my old world, but now I've got this life experience, and I have this nugget that I can really share with people. It's really well received. We in the training, I learned, I just sort of fine-tuned different heart conditions, different medications, how they affect you, different limitations that people should be aware of based on whatever their heart experiences. Um, uh, Talked a lot about dealing with stress. Yoga has a fair amount of breath work that's involved, and really, and just this is just a little nutshell, but by paying attention to your breath and using your breath in a certain way, it settles a part of your nervous system that controls stress in your body. And I think a lot of us that, maybe not so many of us that are aortic dissection people, but a lot of cardiac patients are type A, right? They can't ever let that stress settle. So things like that. It's been just really, really great. And anyone who's interested in joining a class, let me know. I'm happy to get you set up. But it's been really, really a nice way to give back, and a nice way to relate to people again.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Yeah, I still have to get there. I still have not managed to make one, but I'm looking to. But we're also hoping that you will do one with us again on AHTV, so that our specific little aortic community can come join.
The great thing about it is it's very doable. I mean, there's a lot of stretches I could give you just right now as you're sitting here that make a difference. You don't have to be up and down and sweat and all of that to make a difference. And a lot of us have those restrictions. Like for me personally, as a patient, given my history, and also with my pacing issue and my pacemaker, isometric pressure, we have to be super careful about. Those of us that have had dissections or have aneurysms, we do not want any pressure building in our tube, right? At all, none. So isometric pressure, that would mean like downward facing dog or plank. I'm not supposed to do those anymore. Right. Okay, I'm not supposed to do those. My heart rate, I have to be careful with my heart rate. Don't let it get above 150. I'm hard pressed to get it above 150. But the interesting thing is, I remember even 6 months post-op, my surgeon was saying, well, you could train for a marathon, but you just can't do down dog. And it took me a long time to sort that out, because the breathing is different and the pressures that happen in your aorta are super, super different. So again,
Exactly. And I think that's the one thing I wanted to come across with talking to you about.
Yeah.
Is that, like, you have taken this class based on cardiac. Like at this point, especially for us, the things that are potential no-nos for us.
Correct.
And a program like this is not built, because I think people hear the word yoga. Yes. And you're right. They think downward facing dog, and they're like, I don't understand how any of that would be good for me as a dissection patient.
Yes.
But the chair yoga and what you're talking about is not going to stress those things that are no good for us.
Correct. And those of you, again, like Greg, if you were in my class, I would tell you not to do any of the twisting. We do a little bit of twisting. I would say just sit tight, wait for us. We'll catch back up with you and we'll move on to something else. So it's super easy for me to make it, what's the word, like approachable for everyone, and we all need to stretch. We know how good it feels. And again, it does settle your nervous system, which settles the cortisol and the adrenaline in the body, which could potentially lead to heart issues.
And it's movement. It's movement. It's exercise.
Exactly. And again, I have more restrictions with yoga than I do if I wanted to maybe start doing triathlons again or something like, well, cycling's a problem, but anyway, so, and the other part of that's interesting is it's very hard to find information on exercise post dissection and aneurysm. I know our very good friend Carmen David has been working hard on that, but it's very hard. I wanted to be a part of the study that Carmen was in, but I'm not allowed because I have residual dissection. So they can't really study me. So I can watch sort of some of the exercise research that's coming out of University of Texas, but it's really hard. So anybody who's younger who wants to move, it's really hard to figure out what the rules are. And I don't think our surgeons really know what the rules are either. So it's up to
they're still learning. I think they just have basic target areas for what they don't want to see a heart rate get to.
Exactly.
And everything like that. But everybody is different,
Right.
Like you said that I used to exertion heart rate never went anywhere. But I was always high to start with. So I could be at 110, 115 but then be in the middle of a soccer game and have the same heart rate.
Yeah.
It wouldn't go anywhere with exertion.
And this was post.
Now, my
Or
amputations, if you put me on a treadmill
yes.
for 10 minutes,
Yes.
because of how much work it requires me to do with every step,
yeah,
I get up to 150 like that. So
yeah, yeah,
it's a
yeah.
quarter mile on a treadmill at a time. That's
Well,
it.
yeah. And that, well, and that's the thing. The other thing is, I want as a survivor, and being so passionate about yoga all these years, and now having the ability to combine the two, I want everyone to feel successful. You can do something. You can stretch, and it's going to make you feel better. You don't. I think after these events that we have, we all feel so depleted and depressed, and I read about it all the time, and it affects our caretakers, it affects our family. So I would encourage you guys, even if all you can do is walk, just walk. Don't feel
Right.
defeated.
And that's the point. And that's why I think um I am as gung-ho about trying to get involved and with you and doing as much stuff with the cardiac yoga as possible, is because not all of us are going to run a marathon again.
No, right.
Some people are very fortunate that they can have that level of running.
Right.
All of us are very different. Some of us have a lot more restrictions.
Yes.
But like you said, that little bit of walking and the stretching, that goes a long way to actually get movement going,
yes.
getting breathing right and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
That goes a long way. And
well,
yeah, and it goes somewhere to emotional. It really goes to the emotional aspect of feeling like you're being active.
Absolutely. I was going to just tap into that. It releases endorphins. So if you are feeling, I still sometimes wake up and think, I look in the mirror and I look at all my pills on my counter and I think, how did this happen? And I think we all need, that space where we can feel safe. And like I said, just a little bit of stretching releases endorphins, and that can change your mood like this. I'm not saying, you're going to go from being depressed to being on cloud 9, but it's the little steps. And all of us that have had heart events, another part of my journey has been volunteering with heart patients and their families. It's with an organization called Mended Hearts. And, depression after a cardiac event is a real thing. It is a real thing, and it trickles down into the family, into the caretakers. It's real. I know you've probably felt it. I have felt it. I still.
And I'm glad you mentioned it. It's a perfect segue, because I was going to bring up, obviously, that you have done work with Mended Hearts and everything like that.
Yeah. And even now, I've only had one surgery. I think you've had a few, if I'm not mistaken.
I've two or three, depending on whether you're not, like, you count the fact that, like, the second, like, the night of, after the initial emergency one, they had to go in and do a bypass a second time, because they had to restore blood flow back to something that did not work through the first surgery.
Yeah.
So technically, it would be it's three, it's two, truly, but technically a third. That was aortic related.
Yeah, you've earned three. Yeah. But I think what I was leading up to with that is, if anybody's watching and going through this for the first time, depression is real, and it's very unique to heart patients. If you think about it, they're opening, if you've had an open procedure anyway, they're tinkering and opening with a place where there's a lot happening emotionally in our heart area, right? And if you study Eastern medicine, you know what I'm talking about. But we hold a lot of emotions, a lot of love, and somebody's going in there tinkering with it to save our lives. But still, it affects us. It affects us. And even now, almost being 7 years post-op, I definitely have my days. I definitely have my days, and it's more than just sort of feeling down, right? It definitely is attached to the medical event that happened to me, my pacemaker, my whatever, my this, my that. So it's real. And so don't try to fight it. That's what I would say to the newer patients. It's real. There's nothing wrong with getting help, finding someone to speak to, getting more active with groups like this. There are several groups like Aortichope. This one's the best though, but.
Oh, you flatter us.
Right. But Mended Hearts is also a great resource. It was established, I think, like 70 years ago. It's peer-to-peer heart support. So it's not just aneurysms and dissection. It's really any type of heart event that you've had. And we volunteer in the hospitals. COVID has been weird, so all of our volunteering has either been on the phone or online. And we just meet people and their families who are either having procedures in the cath lab. I've met many of families, so worried in the waiting room while their loved ones were going in for surgery. And then I used to hang out on the ICU and just offer support. So that was another part of, I think, my recovery and my healing, was a way to give back. And I'm really missing that during COVID. But I think things are starting, some of the restrictions are starting to drop.
Starting to lift a little bit. More and more vaccinations and more freedom.
Yeah, so it's called Mended Hearts International. If you guys want to Google it, they have forums and topics and meetings all over the world. And now everything's online. And
yeah, and you can find out information about Mended Hearts as well on our website on aortichope.org.
Exactly.
Because we've partnered with them, obviously. We try to do a lot of peer-to-peer initially, and hit some snags, and then we kind of felt that it was better for us to try to collaborate with them and help give them more of a dissection aspect, where it wasn't just all cardiac, really give them a bunch of people that could be involved and contacted.
Yes. Yeah.
Dissection based. So we provide some information about Mended Hearts on our website. So I definitely tell everyone, check it out. Yeah, it's awesome. So let's see. So you brought up a lot of stuff. Obviously, what your information. Okay. Let's talk about PTSD.
Okay.
Did you have experiences with that?
I do. So honestly, before my event, I never really had explored any therapy at all, really. I just never had. And it was nothing that was sort of common within my family or my siblings or even my peer group. It was just, I just never, I don't want to say I never needed it, because I probably did need it, but I never searched it out. And so certainly after my event, I'm trying to think who first gave. Oh, I know. As part of my cardiac rehab experience, the way it's set up where I am is, of course, you get your workouts. You also get 3 sessions with she's actually called a behavioral cardiologist. So it's the therapist, but she's specific to cardiac events. You get sessions with her. You get sessions with a nutritionist. And then after I had my sessions with the therapist, honestly, she was not in network, so I had to search for somebody else, because I like, the financial part of all of this is a huge thing too. Even though my insurance is amazing, I just didn't feel like I could pay out of network. Call me cheap, but I mean, I just felt like there were so many medical bills flying our way. So I did seek out a therapist. I went to her for about a year in dealing with PTSD. And part of my story, 2 weeks prior to my dissection, my dad had died. He had cancer, but I was in hospice holding his hand and whatever. So I had these 2 huge events that happened in October of that year that I needed help with. And, there's no shame in finding help. And I went for a solid year and a half. And sometimes she gave me really good tools. Other times it felt like a waste of time, if I'm being honest. But I think that's how therapists are, right? It just kind of depends. But in terms of skills that she gave me in dealing with the PTSD, I mean, I know Karin Anderson had really good success with the, I think EMDR, whatever it's called.
EMDR, yeah.
I've never had that. I'm curious about it, but I've never had it. But no, the PTSD, there are certain things that trigger me. I'm trying to think what triggers me lately. I think anytime my pacing feels a little funny, remember I have a pacemaker. Yeah. Anytime I feel a little funny, I'm like, wait a second, that's supposed to be controlled with this device. Like, what's happening? So anytime I'm feeling like that, I kind of have to step back for a minute. I mean, look, I've got an Apple Watch. I've got a compact blood pressure monitor that I carry in my bag everywhere I go. I mean, you guys know this, right? I mean, this is what what it is. I'm also a prayerful person. So my faith is important. It plays a big role in my life. And I've leaned on that a lot in terms of trying to manage PTSD. And it comes and goes. Right now, it's kind of creeping up a little bit these days.
Right. And it hits people completely differently.
Yes.
I know plenty of people in the community are sight and sound triggered.
Right.
Maybe a smell trigger.
Yeah.
That never really hit me as much.
Yeah.
But I was the nightmares, the constantly reliving my event, but because I don't remember what happened for the first 10 days.
Yes.
I don't know what is true, what is a memory, or what is it just a nightmare? I don't know.
Yeah.
Or is there a memory coming back? That's where it really hit me. So I go through bouts with that. But like I said, I know certain people are sound and smell triggered.
Yeah, I had some of the sleep disturbances probably for a year after. Just panic in the middle of the night, just from a sound sleep, straight up crying, panicking, and back to my event, I passed out in a grocery store, and sort of people, you also do kind of get this a little bit of irreverent or twisted sense of humor about this. I think for me, it's a coping skill. And people over the years have asked me, what do I remember about fainting? And all I remember was this beautiful stack of lemons, right? Like in a pyramid. And I remember, of course, my biggest concern, I didn't want to crack my head open, forget about everything. I didn't realize this was happening. I didn't have any pain at all. So that was a blessing. I just knew I was going to faint. And where was I going with this? Oh, so people would joke with me and ask if lemons were a trigger, and they weren't. But that was sort of the last thing I saw when I went down, was a stack of lemons. And then people asked me if I still shopped at that same grocery store. It was sort of a higher end market kind of thing. And I stayed away from that market for a long time. But like I said earlier, one day I kind of woke up and I said, why am I so afraid to go into that store? They helped me. They did all the right things, all the right things. So I'm back to shopping in that store with no problem.
That's good. That's a huge step.
Yeah. Oh, it is a huge step because, again, as the mom that stays home, I was in charge of all the grocery shopping, right? So to kind of go through this event and then still be we weren't doing delivery groceries at this time, right? We hadn't had COVID yet. So I was still in the grocery store shopping and dealing with that. But again,
I want people to know that is common. Where you are, what maybe you were doing, those are common triggers.
Yeah.
That a lot of us feel. For me, it was the shower. I still have my moments where going into the shower.
Is that where
I'm almost 8 years and still going into the shower to this day. I'm uneasy. I want in and out of there as quickly as possible.
Because that's where it happened?
That's where it happened. Or at least that's where I knew I was in trouble.
Yeah.
And for me, and that was my own shower.
Yeah.
Now I'm in a different state, it's not even that safe. And that has alleviated a little bit. I will say that.
Yeah.
When getting out of the place, that physical shower.
Yeah.
When I moved down to Florida, that alleviated a little bit, but it didn't take away. It's still something with the shower and stuff. I can feel my heart rate start to speed up a little bit. I want in and out. The days of like enjoying the water beating on my head does not happen in the shower anymore.
And do you have to tell people you're going into the shower? Like, do you want people to know where you are? Do you say
I'm past that.
Okay.
I can now do it on my own. But for the first couple of years, I wouldn't shower when I was by myself.
Yes.
People would know I was going in.
Yeah.
I had to change my behavior because at the time my girlfriend, that given night, she went to sleep. I did my late night. I'm not really feeling right. I'm just going to go take a shower and relax.
Yeah.
Sort of shower. And I'm not feeling right was a hint that something was about to happen.
Yeah.
So that was for a while of you're not going to get up in the middle of the night and decide to jump in the shower just to cool off or relax.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
Which I agreed with, because that was my biggest fear at that point was, in the moment was, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be found dead, naked in the shower.
Yeah. Yeah. But the
Like,
other
I need
part
to
of
get out of
it,
here as quickly as possible, get everybody up. We need to go. Unlike you, like you knew you were feeling faint,
yes.
boom. And I remember that was very unique because not a lot of us might have syncope, but not all of us like lose consciousness the way that you did.
Yeah.
I
I,
remember that when I first heard your story, like,
uh-huh.
wow, that's uncommon. She was out, like, done.
Well, it's interesting though, because of course, maybe like you, I went back and connected all the dots, right? Found the EMT guys, talked to them. Of course, have a great relationship with the docs in the emergency department now, and then my surgeon. And interestingly enough, when my surgeon, there was maybe 20 minutes getting me to the hospital, getting me into surgery, right? We all know that the how fast people have to work on us, but my surgeon tells a story. He was trying to evaluate me, and I was speaking with him, but I would not open my eyes. He said it was the most frustrating thing. And of course, this was many years later as we were sort of laughing about it. But he says, I will never forget you. You sat there, we were talking, but you would not open your eyes. And certainly when I first got to the hospital, to the emergency department, they had me sort of thinking I had either OD'd on something or that I was having a stroke. That's kind of how I was presenting. And then, interestingly enough, thank God for nurses. I know we just had Nurses Week, but the story goes, my situation was declining very, very quickly. And a nurse just kind of said, I think this might be a dissection. And then, doom, 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 everything went. So, God bless nurses. I mean, I think the doctors probably would have figured it out at some point, but this nurse just kind of spoke up. And that kind of ties into another thing that I've been helping us with is the Think Aorta posters. I have definitely, in the state of Florida, up here, been distributing these posters anywhere and everywhere just to keep people aware of the symptoms, especially if you're, a frontline worker and that kind of thing.
Right, because it's so important. The quick diagnosis is so important. Like you said,
Everything.
so many of us are deteriorating so quickly
Yeah.
that if they're not on the ball, all those statistics start to slow, complication after complication, something that we might not come back from. I
Right.
mean, they
Right.
did everything right in my case.
Right.
And I still was multi-organ failure
Yeah.
for days afterward.
Right.
All that stuff happened and they did everything right. Nobody could ever begrudge how quickly I was diagnosed. The
Mhm.
EMT felt it and everything like that. I could never begrudge how my case was handled.
Yeah.
But like you said, it was still, it was still a disaster for me. I was 98 days in the hospital.
Yeah. 98. Yeah. Yeah.
98.
Yeah.
98 days in the hospital. And they knew it and they caught it and they got it correctly. I was in a CT scanner 5 minutes after getting to the hospital.
Yeah.
I was still 98 days in the hospital.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, and that's the other thing. I think you were probably on the younger side of things, and I was on the younger side of things. And obviously, I'm a woman, but maybe that's not the first thing that comes to mind for these people, right? A younger, seemingly fit person presents, and like I said, they thought I had taken something, or I don't want to say just stroking, but that I was having a stroke.
The drugs becomes the question. I mean, the stroke thoughts are not horrible because the neurological gets them on the right track.
Yeah.
So if they start to think there's a neurological deficit and then it gets added to the right physical symptom, like a difference in BPs in arms and stuff like that, that'll point them in the right direction of dissection.
Yeah.
That's the good part of it. It's not good to exist. It's not good to live it, like and as well as I know, that neurological decline is very quick. It can happen. I don't remember anything.
Yeah.
I was speaking nonsense.
Yeah.
To everybody. But I was conscious the whole time. Never lost consciousness.
You don't remember it, but you don't remember.
I don't remember a thing.
I think we kind of tuck that stuff away. I think and that's probably part of the PTSD, like we talked about. It's like we kind of tuck it away, but it's still in our thoughts and in our systems, and
Oh yeah, your mind definitely
Our
it
memory.
your yeah, your mind definitely it protects you. So
Yeah,
it lets you know what you should remember and what you shouldn't.
right, right.
Like I
Yeah,
said, that's my biggest challenge. My biggest challenge is figuring out like, okay, is this a memory? Because the memory, I don't mind reliving the memory. If I have to relive the memory, I'll relive the memory of it. But I don't want the feeling of that didn't happen to me and I'm just creating this nightmare that didn't exist.
yeah,
That's what scares me because so much of that first couple of weeks in ICU psychosis and everything I had was what is real, what isn't real.
yeah, 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 yeah. I didn't really have that, but I have with Mended Hearts visited patients that were struggling with that. There would be paintings on the wall, and they would, sometimes I would be holding the patient's hand, and he would say, "Are those ducks moving? There's birds in the pictures, they're moving. They're going to get me tonight." So all that's real. That's real. Forget about what's naturally happening to our own sort of brain chemistry when we're having these major events, but then all the meds added into it, right? And stress. We don't really know. I don't think, truthfully, how our bodies really manage all that stress, but I'm sure it's
I
pretty common, Greg. It's pretty common what you're
Yeah,
describing.
no,
Yeah,
it's exactly it's almost par for the course. You can hear it. You hear it's varying degrees in everybody, but it's there
yeah,
to some
yeah,
extent. Uh,
yeah.
I I was completely I had no idea where it was. I was combative. I'd be the first to admit it, but
I was combative too. Yeah, they had me, tied down. Like, yeah, yeah,
yeah, I was first coming to. I was pulling everything out. I got the mitten treatment
yeah,
and the
yeah,
hands tied down
yeah.
definitely because you don't realize it. You were fine a day ago.
I'm part of
At a
that
young
clinic.
age, you were fine a
I
day
remember
ago, and
telling
then all
people
of a
later
sudden,
on. Yeah, I remember telling people later on. No, I teach yoga. I'm gentle. I'm love. It's all about love. I wasn't combative, but I was.
yeah, no,
I was.
I think we all are to some extent at some point, a
Yeah.
little bit. Whether it's it's I think it's normal. Um, okay, so let's uh, so you had your event, everything's there.
Yeah.
You're approaching your first aortiversary. It's now 1 year past the event.
Hmm.
I'm assuming that you're going for your scans and stuff like that. What was that first aortiversary like?
So it's funny. I think we talked about this not too long ago, where I shared some notes with you. I couldn't really recollect in my mind. So actually, Facebook, social media helped me remember what my feelings were that day. And I remember, well, as I searched sort of for that day, um, what I noted was everything was normal. It was a normal day. I woke up, got my kids ready for school, took them to school, went to work out, which was cardiac rehab, but went to work out. My husband went to work. I went to the grocery store. I made dinner. Like, it was all normal things. And for me, that was huge. It's no news is good news, really. I feel like for us, um, I'm sure my kids made a cake, or I don't really remember. I'm sure they
I
made a.
think that's important. I think you just touched upon something that is very important
I
also to
just,
understand is that it's different for all of us.
yeah,
For some of us, it might not be this huge. You might not make a big deal milestone
yeah,
of it.
yeah,
It you might want to make it look like it's just another day.
yeah,
I've reached this date and that.
yeah,
Other people celebrate it giantly. I think it changes over the course of the years
yes,
based on what you need.
yes,
I think that's the most important thing. If it's a
yeah,
day that
yeah,
you truly want to celebrate, celebrate it.
yeah. No, for me, it was just a normal day. Um, and yeah,
I
that
think
first,
the fact that you went grocery shopping on that day
that's a win.
is a giant win. I think that's, I mean, I would have like, nope, not
Right.
going in a grocery store today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe I was challenging fate, but that first year is super nerve wracking. Like, all the tests and the scans. And again, I live here in Washington, D.C., so I was part of a study at the NIH where they were doing this new CT on vascular, blah, blah, blah. So I was doing that. And then I was doing MRAs. And who ever heard of an MRA? right? I know what an MRI is, but what the heck is an MRA? And so I was constantly reminded that I was sort of this new special in a way I didn't want to be special, right?
Right.
So, and my pacemaker, I remember it was Halloween. I was still in the hospital, and they came in and they said, I had been cardioverted many, many times on so much amiodarone. It was, just horrendous. Finally, they decided on a pacemaker. So the pacemaker went in on Halloween. And of course, I had, jokes about looking like Frankenstein with all the blood and the scars and all of that. And when my pacemaker went in, my surgeons and my electrophysiologist, they were like, this is the newest. It's MRI compatible, which is what you're going to need because of your connective tissue disease. This is the creme de la creme. Okay, great. So they give it to me. It's working. Everything's fine. It's time to be scanned. Nobody will take me to be scanned because protocols are not in place, even here in this Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. Now, I could have gone to Baltimore to Hopkins, but they were booking like 6 months out. So it was this whole, again, I was reminded that I was special in a way I didn't want to be special. Do you know what I'm saying? Like everything, it was not seamless. I felt a little bit like a guinea pig, truthfully, a little bit like a guinea pig. And I remember my electrophysiologist saying, don't worry, we're going to start scanning at this hospital, this hospital over here. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, but I don't want to be one of the first ones. I don't want to be one of the first ones with this device in my body going through an MRA. Anyway, long and short of it, I do get my scans done here in the Washington, D.C. area. It is a little nerve-wracking, and everything is fine. So we have gotten into a rhythm and a routine, and I'm okay with it. But certainly that first year was filled of a lot of reminders that we were special for kind of the wrong reasons. We were sick and suffering, and you know what I'm saying.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, especially that first year. I mean, it was rough. I mean,
yeah. And every time you go for the scan, they read the chart and they'll say, "What? You had an aortic dissection? What? You're lucky to be alive, right?" How many people said that to you the first year, and still say it, right?
Right. No, exactly. I mean, at the time for me, not that you were much older. I was 38.
Yeah.
And the 38-year-old.
Right. I was 46. Yeah. So I had the same.
You had a dissection. You were 38, and I was like, yeah.
Right. But that's a trigger. That's a trigger. Don't you think it kind of it kind of heightens you a little bit again, right? Like
exactly.
This was
and then everyone tells you how lucky you are and how fortunate you are, and me. But just hearing it, why me? Why did I survive this? Why is this? And you start getting into I survived it, and then you're in our community and you start hearing stories of others that didn't.
Right.
Like, why am I here? Why are they not?
Yes.
Why did they suffer something that I had and they're not?
Too, I'm just so sympathetic and sad for people that have lost loved ones. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It is hard to read those stories of loss in the community. It does touch a nerve. It makes me feel really fragile, and just really sad for those families.
No, exactly, and that's why I think that like you brought up Think Aorta, and I think that's why even with us with Aortichope and getting involved with Think Aorta and everything like that, why it was so important was because you don't want to hear the horror story, especially not. Listen, this is an unfortunate situation, and it's going to claim people, even in the best case scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
In a perfect case, your brother found out, had the surgery, and unfortunately didn't, didn't come through it like your other brothers did.
That's right.
That can exist and can happen.
Right.
But the last thing I want it to be is because we're missing diagnoses and stuff. And that's why I think all those risk factors and trying to get all emergency technicians and hospital employees and emergency room doctors to understand, like, we need you to think this is possible. It's not, it's not just a white whale. There's more of us out here.
That's right.
It may not be the most common in a small percentage area, but
it can
still happen.
it's happening. And, you know, I think I mentioned when I started cardiac rehab, I was the youngest person in there by far. And this whole aortic aneurysm dissection group that I've met online through various groups, there is sort of a younger skew, I feel like, to the patients. Those of us are, I don't know if it's something that's happening in the culture or again, better diagnostics, you know?
I think it's probably a little bit because we're in a community that social media and the community at large is, you know, skews a little bit younger
Yeah.
Than everything else. But I think it's also you're seeing a generation of people that didn't just succumb to it.
Yeah, right.
That survived it. The knowledge of diagnosing it is getting better and better. And I think that you're seeing a generation where surviving it is just not that mysterious cardiac event
Yeah.
that a 42-year-old succumbed to.
Yeah.
That nobody really, you know, and when they have that and they know it's cardiac, families don't always drag autopsies or anything like that. So a lot of the times they don't know. You don't know what happened. It's just listed as a cardiac event.
I still have so many people that I interact with, whether it's on social media or childhood friends, you know, and they'll say, "Oh, when you had your stroke, when you had your heart attack," and I'm like, "Yeah, no, I didn't have either of those," you know. But I think everybody just kind of lumps it all into sort of this familiar place. But we're much more unique than that, right, Greg? Much more unique.
Yes. No. Yeah, we are definitely in a smaller about that. And that's not making light of anybody that had a heart attack or stroke.
Sure. Yes. No, it didn't even come across that way, but yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's definitely it's a smaller elite group.
Yeah.
You know, which comes with its own challenges.
Of course.
A lot of the challenges of this that we've talked about. I mean, emotionally, you're managing a chronic illness.
Yeah.
This is something that will chronically be managed the rest of your life.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, some better than others. Some might not have restrictions. Some might be able to do certain things, but you are always going to be monitored a lot differently than, say, an isolated cardiac event and someone has, you know, some arteries cleared out and then
or something,
and then they go on with maybe some dietary restrictions and they go out and live their life and hopefully everything's fine. This is, you know, it's a different beast.
Well, also because it is connective tissue, right? So we have connective tissue all over our bodies. So again, this sort of situation, this disease, it can come up in many different places for us. You know, it's not just always going to be cardiac related. So
right. No, you're 150% correct on that. Okay, let's see where we want to go. Quick together. I think you've pretty much touched upon everything. But if you could go back in time and you now are speaking to you, let's say in the first couple months post your event, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
Ooh, I would probably just, and I've used these words with other people as well. I would remind myself to be a patient. I mentioned before, I wasn't released to cardiac rehab until 10 weeks post-op. That's a long time to be sitting around. So I think that was hard, you know, and the house would be quiet. The kids, like I said, the kids were at school. My husband was at work. You're sitting around the house. You're kind of afraid to be alone anyway, like you mentioned with the shower, right? And you sense that your family members, you know, my husband was always texting me, my mom, my brothers, everybody was always, you know, checking on me. So that also added to it. But I think just being a patient, I mean, and also realizing that I didn't do anything to cause this. I didn't do anything to cause this. I don't know what I could have done differently. to not have this happen to me. I think at some point in time, it probably would have connected or caught up with me, especially once I learned my brothers all were struggling with it as well. It was going to rear its ugly head at some point. Oh, I hear a puppy.
Yes, a dog wanted to chime in briefly.
Of course.
But
I think just to be patient, we are, and I know the other thing I know for me with recovery, I would have a good day and I would think, all right, we're on that trajectory, we're on that path. Like the next day has got to be a good day also, but it doesn't work that way. As you know, it's more of a roller coaster, right? So have your good day, be grateful for it, but release any expectations about the next day, right? I mean, because you could have a crappy day next day. So,
and I would say a lot of us sometimes on the good day, especially if you're feeling good physically and mentally, we tend to push ourselves.
Overdo,
which could help cause
a bad day,
the sluggish day the following day. So I think you're absolutely right. I think to just, be patient. I think that's why Karin and I both specifically talked about like measuring in weeks or months and seeing how you progress, because if you're just looking for day in, day out progress, you're going to have a step back.
Of
They're
course.
going to exist.
Yeah, it's like
a lot of days that are step backwards.
Oh yeah, it's like one step forward, three steps back kind of thing, right? Yeah, it's not a perfect trajectory once you start feeling well. So those would be a couple things that I would bring up to somebody who is, in that place.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic. Let me see if I have any other questions for you.
We talked a lot about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, no, we covered a lot. I'm very, I'm happy you joined me today.
Yeah, thank you.
What I will say is that we hopefully will be, we will be including a link on this to your, to any group that you want us to, if you want us to share a link to the page that you do for Suburban Hospital with cardiac yoga if you want.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll look into that.
And we will definitely be hoping to schedule something. I have a feeling that you'll be seeing Karin on this channel.
We're the two crazy Karens, and neither of us we both have non-traditional ways of spelling their names.
Yeah, I know you're both the I, but you still to be different with the C and the K.
And we Karin lives a little bit closer to Baltimore than I do, but we have met up in Baltimore and had a great time together. So no, she does a great job representing all of us.
That's fantastic. So we'll wrap this up. I don't know. I haven't seen if we have any questions. See if we have any questions. No questions. No current questions. So we will wrap this up. Karin, I would like to thank you so much for joining us today. I would like to thank anybody that watched us live and anybody that's watching this video. And thank you for that. And please remember to like and subscribe to this video and this channel. And Karin, thanks again so much for joining us.
I enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Greg. Thanks for all you do too.
Thank you. And we hope to see you soon here on, AHTV and Where Are They Now?
Sounds good. Enjoy your weekend.
Yes, everybody enjoy your weekend.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Karin.